I think I'm recording. Okay. So, Northern Ireland Issues by Michael Santori. So first we're going to talk about the history of Ireland as a island and under British rule real quick. So the main division within Ireland and especially Northern Ireland is the difference between the Protestants and the Catholics. Um, the Catholics are Irish Catholics, native to the island, and the island of Britain itself, of England, is mainly Protestant. And when the British took over Ireland a very long time ago, they sent missionaries to parts of Northern Ireland to convert people to Protestant from Catholicism. And they made laws that said anyone anyone who practiced Catholicism would be thrown in jail or fined. Um, and this led to obvious discontent with British rule and religious tensions. However, the oppression did not stop there. It ended up to continue for about another 100 years, and around the time of World War One, shortly after Irish independence, there was a vote for Ireland, the island, and the counties that there were 6 counties that voted to stay with the UK, and that was Northern Ireland, and that was due to a Protestant majority within the communities. And what happened within these communities was after, obviously, the people of Ireland were very upset because it is their native land and they want their island, they want their land, and there was Protestants that had converted and had moved over from Britain, and they were basically blocking them from taking this land. So this is where the Irish Republican Army, or the IRA, kind of comes into the picture. They are arguably a terrorist group with a somewhat noble cause, and that is to free Northern Ireland from British rule. Um, but the problem is that they're a terrorist group, so that's obviously not good. And so the IRA continued the fight for freedom even after it was signed and granted Irish freedom, but they did it through terroristic ways, such as car bombs. They would have civilians drive at gunpoint into checkpoints with possibly the British Army or highly congested areas and blow up the car and themselves. And all they were trying to do was just trying to kick the United Kingdom's influence off of the the island of Ireland. But obviously, this has failed. There was an armistice that was signed in 1998, and now the IRA does not operate through terrorism, but through political means, which is a much better way to operate, especially if you want independence. Um, so they continue to fight for Irish independence in Northern Ireland from England today. But we do still have some current tensions in Northern Ireland even after the armistice was signed. And these all go back to the Protestant and Catholic issues and the divide within society. So there are things that are illustrated here called peace lines, and the peace lines divide cities such as Belfast and other cities throughout Northern Ireland. And the divide is to keep the Protestants and the Catholics away from each other because they don't really like each other. They don't really get along. And usually when they mix, there tends to be some kind of altercation. So they have the peace lines up, and I'm not saying that it happens all the time, but they have the peace lines up to try to prevent such altercations that do happen. And there is also what is it here? There's also the issue of Brexit, And this is kind of a big issue here, and this political cartoon kind of demonstrates it pretty well. You have the EU and you have um, the UK, and they're both pulling on this little Irish tugboat here, and they're going to split it in half. Because due to the UK having part of Northern Ireland and them splitting off the European Union, what this is going to do is right now, because both countries, Ireland and the United Kingdom, are part of the European Union, they have a soft border. Citizens can commute from Ireland into Northern Ireland and back. They can go see their relatives that live in Northern Ireland or vice versa. But once the UK officially leaves the EU, which I don't know the exact date, but it's in maybe a year or so when they officially leave, the border will have to be a hard border, which means there's going to have to be basically border patrol. You're going to have to go through screening and everything every single time you want to go through the border, which would divide the Irish people, which in which they probably wouldn't be happy about. And what would concern me is it could lead to a rise in terrorism again because of the divide, and it will lead to a rise in nationalism again in Northern Ireland in trying to make Ireland one country again, which will lead to violence. Um, Now on to the conclusion and solution part of the video. I personally believe that unification is the correct way to go in this situation. I think that Northern Ireland should be part of Ireland and not part of the UK. Now, this, of course, would raise some issues such as possible oppression of the Protestants in the area due to now a Catholic majority within the country of Ireland. But I think if unification is a possibility, there should be some guidelines as to how it is handled and how the transition is handled, because you don't want a mass exodus of people to the UK just because there's a unification process. Also, if we're going to not be unified and if it's going to stay the same way, status quo, there needs to be stricter guidelines. Something I had not mentioned earlier and forgot to mention in the current tension section of the video was that the police force is not representative of the Catholics in Northern Ireland. The police force is a much majority of Protestants. Also, the schools are segregated, and they did this by having public schools being all Protestants and Catholic schools being private schools being all Catholic. So this leads to a division within the people. They do not interact with each other that often, especially when there's peace lines within their city, which does not help tensions amongst each other. So I think if status quo stays the same, I think that is probably the worst option of the two, either of Northern Ireland becoming part of Ireland. If we stay status quo, we have to deal with the issue of still segregation, and of course the issue of terrorism that will come with the rise of nationalism once the hard border is put up, and of course the hard border, which is also going to be quite an issue with people migrating to the north and the Northern Ireland, so the north part of the island, and Southern Ireland. So here is my bibliography. Most of these are just pictures. We start citing real sources here. And here's some more sources, and there is a couple more. Thank you for watching, and have a nice day.